Ladies and gentlemen, here he is, Arthur Schwartz, the food maven. Good morning, Arthur.
Truth be told, I didn't realize it was Columbus Day until I woke up this morning.
Columbus Day, Indigenous People Day, I mean, you name it, it's that day.
It's that day, okay. So everybody's celebrating everybody, I hope.
And it's Labor Day.
So anyway, moving on. You do know that I'm going to be up in your neck of the woods, literally.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I'm going to be at this is very embarrassing, but I truly don't ever remember the name of the library, but it's the library in Sheffield. It has an actual name. I'm looking it up as we speak. And I'll be there on Saturday, November 6th. November 6th. I think it is a month from now.
Yeah, it's the Bushnell. It's the Bushnell Sage Library. The Bushnell Sage Library. Yeah.
That's it, Bushnell. And I even have a phone number, but we'll get to that later.
Okay.
So, but you can call the library, and you have to reserve. And by the way, I've been already told it's extremely COVID safe, meaning there are only going to be 30 people in the room. It's got new ventilation. I don't need to go on. So back to eating. There's only one thing I do better than eat, and I can't talk about it on the radio. So the phone number to reserve your place at the Bushnell, the Bushnell, again, is it Bushnell Sage Library?
Yep.
I've got to fixate that in my brain. Bushnell Sage in Sheffield is 413-229-7004. And somebody should, at that number, be able to take your reservation. I have been cooking a lot of eggplant, only because it's there. It seems to be, every season is different. And I think I haven't asked a farmer about this, but there is more eggplant around and different kinds of eggplant around than I've ever seen before. And, of course, it looks so... And here's how I know it's fresh. The first thing, after it should look glossy. Whatever kind of eggplant it is, it should be firm. It should look glossy. However, the real telling is the calyx at the top. That's the green cap at the stem end of the eggplant. If that is green and fuzzy, it's a freshly picked eggplant. I have not cooked an eggplant in literally years that needed to be salted. We used to salt eggplant all the time because it had a bitter edge. The salt would seem to leach out. It also, when you're frying eggplant is a sponge. When you're frying eggplant, like say for parmigiano or something like that, you have to salt it because you don't have to salt it, but you salt it because it absorbs less oil. Let me say, old-fashioned caponata, which is what I did yesterday, was my project of the day. Old-fashioned caponata is very oily. Just accept that. I have eaten it all over Sicily, and it's always oily. Sometimes it's too sweet, because what caponata in Sicily is a sweet and sour eggplant dish with some other things added to make it super interesting. But the word caponata is used in a lot of places in Italy. For instance, in Naples, caponata is not Sicilian caponata. It's a salad based on with a bed of bread, but not regular bread, dried out bread. Freselle, you see them. We have them in our stores. Pane biscottato means twice baked bread. Some kind of pane biscottato or freselle, which is the dry bread that comes in rings. You can buy it in an Italian bakery, but I see them even in supermarkets these days. And you douse that bread with salt water, and then you put addressed tomatoes. The most basic would be just putting tomatoes, dressed with oil and maybe garlic, maybe red pepper. I mean to say red onion. Red pepper ain't bad either. And that's it. When I first went to Cecilia's bed and breakfast, Azienda Celiano, this is 25 years ago, at least, she was teaching me some stuff over the few days that I was there. I was there for Christmas, New Year, and it was filled with people, with wonderful people. We had such a good party. Anyway, point is, I'm leaving. The car is loaded. I'm about to drive off. We're doing our last hugs and goodbyes, and she says, "Oh, I forgot to tell you the most important thing." She drags me back into the kitchen, right there, by the way, and she teaches me how to dip the bread for caponata, napolitana, because to her, that's like a basic of Neapolitan Salernitano cooking. But caponata, as most Americans know it, is the Sicilian one, which is a cooked mixture of eggplant, celery. It's a surprising ingredient, I always think. Olives, capers, sometimes, not always, sweet red pepper. Rarely, but occasionally, I see people put zucchini in, but Americans put zucchini in. Sicilians reserved that for something else. And tomatoes, not a lot. It's not tomato sauce, but it's a sweet and sour condiment. And usually it's sweetened with sugar, and it's soured with vinegar. I am not, a sugar fan these days, so when I made mine yesterday, I underdid the sugar. But in the end, I added balsamic vinegar before I served it because it really needed that extra little sweetness and little oomph. Anyway, I want to go back to the other kinds of caponata. The word is used also, I discovered, I never saw this here, in Calabria. They do a caponata, also based on eggplant, but with the first food of Calabria is hot peppers. So this is those long green hot peppers. I use about 4 of them because I like them and I like it hot. About, I would say, 3 medium onions. I'll get to the amounts in volume in a minute. And about 1.5 pounds of eggplant. And it's a melange of those 3 things with a lot of olive oil. Well, you don't have to use that much olive oil. And I first had this at a sausage stand in the Sila Mountains. Now, the Sila Mountains are in the winter is a place for skiing. In the summer, it's a place to escape the heat down the mountain. And so it has tourism almost all year. And along the roads in the Sila are these kiosks that sell grilled sausage and with peppers and onions, like we would buy at an Italian fair, or you get at your pizzeria, or I make it home all the time. And I'm supposing, because I found out in middle age that what I thought were all Neapolitans here in Brooklyn ended up to be Calabrese. So, they get everywhere. Calabria is, I have to say, just south of, it's just south of Campania, of the Naples region. Anyway, and it has both shore and mountains, and it's a wonderful tourist place. And so there are all these kiosks that sell sausage and peppers. There's one place, and then I found other places, also had what he was called. I said, "What do you call this?" And his name is Franco, I think, the man who owns this place. And what do you call it? He said, "Caponata Calabrese." So another caponata, and I guess it's the eggplant. So I slice my onions in a different way than usual when I make this. First of all, I slice from instead of along the equator, so to speak. I slice from root to stem end. So they come out sort of like crescents. This is only because Franco did it that way. And about a quarter of an inch thick. You don't really want to be thin with the onions. And then I use, as I said, 4 what they call long green peppers. I saw them in the farmer's market here the other day, and they're a nice size, and they actually vary in heat. Some of them are not that hot at all, so that's a good thing, actually, and some of them can be pretty hot. Don't taste and find out. I must say, if you don't remove the ribs from these peppers, they will be hotter than if you do remove the ribs, and don't use the seeds. So cut the peppers in half lengthwise, scrape out the seeds and the ribs, and then cut the peppers crosswise. Now, they're long, so they're going to be 6 or 8 inches long. So basically cut them in half crosswise. And then the 3 to 4 inch halves, cut them into thin strips. You should have about 2 cups of these thin strips of hot green pepper. This is a hot dish. Now, don't peel the eggplant, but do wash it, dry it, cut off the stem end. And here's how I cut the eggplant. Basically, in the end, I want sticks. I want half-inch wide, quarter-inch thick sticks. So I cut the eggplant crosswise, rounds, into quarter-inch rounds. And then I cut the rounds in stacks into half-inch wide strips. And there's my eggplant. It's not a lot of eggplant. I mean, I'm not giving you a recipe for a lot. This is only like a pound and a half eggplant. It could be even a little smaller. Is like a medium eggplant, 1 medium eggplant. Now, you do need a big skillet to do this, 12 to 14-inch skillet. I have a huge one, old one, that has some kind of crazy no-stick surface that I don't even remember what it's called right now. But what I love about it is it's very heavy aluminum pot, and it's not really all that non-stick, but it's a 14-inch, very heavy aluminum. I like it. So I heat my oil, and I use a substantial amount of oil, at least 3 tablespoons, a quarter of a cup probably would be even better. And I saute first. I throw in the onions. And I toss constantly until the onions wilt. Then I add the hot pepper strips, and I continue to saute for at least another 2 or 3 minutes. Don't let the onions brown, but they should get very golden. And sprinkle. I do sprinkle with salt these days as I'm sauteing onions. I would say 2 big pinches is enough for the starter. And then add your eggplant. As soon as the peppers cook a couple minutes, add the eggplant, and again toss it regularly. Now it will wilt down as it cooks. It's going to take about 5, 6, 7 minutes to wilt down, but it will. And when it does, just lower the heat a little bit and cook it until it gets soft. You're not going to need a whole lot of oil, but you might want to add a little bit more. And that's it. Now, I like this after it's cooled down and then maybe reheated slightly, but it's perfectly good at room temperature. It's great to top a sausage sandwich or just eat on a plate with grilled sausage, grilled Italian sausage. So yesterday's project, I have a lot of caponata. It was a step by step. I decided to make it the old-fashioned way, which is frying the eggplant, boiling the celery, slicing the olives. I had very large olives, so I actually quartered the olives. And I used, by the way, what inspired this whole thing, besides all this eggplant around me, is that for some reason I got these wonderful olives for almost nothing. I don't even remember where I got them now, but I bought a lot at the time. And so I wanted to use them, and I even made an olive salad with them. They were so good. So anyway, first thing you do is this is for a real old-fashioned Sicilian. So I made the old-fashioned Sicilian caponata, and I have to say, I'm not doing it again real soon. What I'm doing is I'm going back to the recipe that I've been making now for a lot of years, given to me by a friend in Syracuse in Sicily. And at the time, 20 years ago, her sons were teenage athletes and very, very health conscious. I hear that they're not so much anymore, now that they're 40-year-old fathers. But she did a baked caponata. Now, I know that there are other baked caponatas around, but I like mine because, besides that I'm attached to Franca, I don't know. You like your own recipes. What can I say? The only problem with it is you can't make it in the middle of the summer. Well, I can't make it in the middle of the summer because it requires the oven being on too long. Now, this recipe is in my Southern Italian cookbook, and I think I even tell this story about her sons being health nuts. I'm looking it up right now, so I'll give you the list. This is what this is. It makes for less oil, a less oily and more healthful caponata, and it is sweet and sour, so you do have to add some sugar. I have to add, when I was making this yesterday, I remembered, and I'm going to make sure that my memory is correct, that Franca uses apple cider vinegar in hers, and I didn't use that. I used white wine vinegar. Yes, she does. Well, she uses either. Okay. So for her, you just cut up everything, and you put it in an 11 by a big roasting pan. You don't want things piled up too much on top of each other. So I figure an 11 by 15-inch roasting pan. I know I do that in my 11 by 15. So I would take let's start with the eggplant, about 1.5 pounds of eggplant, again, not peeled, cut into 1-inch cubes. You'll end up with about 6 cups. And I base everything on that. So 2 large celery ribs cut into 1/2-inch slices. That's about a cup. And a lot of onion. I've been to using red onion for caponata. It's more Sicilian. 3 medium red onions. That's about 3 cups of sliced onion. Well, in this case, I diced the onion. And a large dice, not little 1/4-inch dice, more like 1/2-inch dice. You want to see the onion in the end. You don't want to hide it. So you got a large red onion. I'm sorry, 3 red onions. Well, you want 3 cups. 1 large one could provide you with almost that. And celery, eggplant, 2 heaping tablespoons of capers. Now, I always use salted capers that I rinse off very well, but if you just happen to have the vinegar ones, just use those and rinse them off very well. I put garlic in this, so I don't in the traditional one, but at least 3 large cloves of garlic, coarsely chopped, about a tablespoon or so. A small can of that's the 14-ounce can of peeled Italian tomatoes. I just crush each one in my hand and put it all over the whole thing. And about, my recipe in the book calls for 1/4 cup of extra virgin olive oil. I would go for at least 1/3 cup these days. I'm not afraid of more oil. And it's far less oil than a traditional one. And a 1/2 cup of Sicilian green olives. It's the ones I bought the other day, and they were pitted. If they're not pitted, you've got to slice the olive off of the pit. An olive pitter won't do the job for those big Sicilian green olives, or any of those big green olives. I use my pitter a lot, but I use it for Gaeta olives. And if you could make this with pitted Kalamata. That's a good one, too. Anyway, you put the whole thing in a pan, you toss it all together, and you bake it in a 400-degree oven until everything is tender. And let's not forget that you need salt, pepper, and the sweet and sour part comes from 2 tablespoons of sugar and 2 tablespoons of vinegar, white wine or cider vinegar, and that's it. And you just keep cooking it and tossing it. And it's going to take about an hour and a half at least for everything to get really tender and nice. But that is that. And by the way, you can keep it in the fridge for at least a week. The old-fashioned one that I made yesterday reminded me of my childhood in that this was one of the first real Sicilian things I was introduced to when I was a teenager by my friend's aunt, Nancy Arkin. I can't believe I remember her name, but she was a very influential woman in my life. She was the most sophisticated, well, not the most, but among the top 3 sophisticated women of my youth. Remember, I lived in middle-class Brooklyn, and people were accomplished and educated, but Nancy was very worldly. And when I guess I was only 15 or 16, I used to eat lunch at her house from time to time because she lived like right around the corner from my best friend, and he was very fond of her and her husband, who was his uncle. By the way, the uncle, whose name I can't remember, this is terrible, it may come to me later, when everybody in my teenage years was trying to learn about wine, it was like, we're talking about the 1960s when Americans were starting to drink wine for real. He taught me about booze. I loved it. I learned about scotch and rye and all these whiskeys and gin. And anyway, Nancy used to make for lunch a can of Progresso Caponata, which I don't think exists anymore. I do see Caponata sold in jars and cans. I haven't bought it in many years. I don't know the quality anymore because I do make it myself and for years. She knew it wasn't the best, okay? So she would doll it up by mixing in a can of tuna fish and very often diced red pepper and sometimes even some diced fresh onion. So it was a real salad based on a can of Progresso Caponata. I loved that. And it was the first time I ever heard of Caponata, was Nancy's table. So, so now I have a lot of Caponata. I got to figure out what to do with it. It is excellent. We did have it, and I made Nancy's Caponata salad last night with diced red pepper that was sensationally sweet, and my Caponata and canned tuna fish, and of course lettuce and tomato on the side. So it's very good with roast meat and roast chicken. I actually know someone who makes Caponata with swordfish, and because swordfish is a very meaty fish. Cubes. You could do this several ways, but it's a good combination. If you have an outdoor grill and you like grilling like swordfish kebabs, that's a perfect thing to go with. Grilled swordfish goes great with Caponata. But my friend makes cubes of swordfish, big cubes, like 1.5-inch cubes, because you don't want them to get overcooked, and fries them in olive oil, and then combines it with the Caponata. And I've even seen this combination in the market in Catania. More eggplant than... There was a boy selling eggplant. He wasn't a boy. He was a man selling eggplant in the Catania market who kept screaming out, buy my eggplants. They're bigger than my wife's breasts. Except, of course, he didn't use a nice word like breast. You're supposed to laugh, Marshall.
I did laugh. I chuckled.
It's the radio. You got to hear the laugh. So, yeah. I mean, that was for real. There's no shame in Sicily.
And so there shouldn't be.
So anyway, I don't know what I'm going to do with the rest of the I've been cooking so much because the weather is good for cooking, and I made yet another pot of chili inspired by, of all people, Lady Bird Johnson. I hope we all remember Lady Bird.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she said this. She called this chilly weather. So the first time you have a little chill at the beginning of the fall, it's time to make a pot of chili. So I'm going to get to that again too. I have well-stocked freezer, but what I discovered, my trick these days, it's not a trick. I think I mentioned a few weeks ago that I was reading this history of chili called A Bowl of Red, and in it he points out that ground beef is not exactly what they were making at the back of a chuck wagon. So you either stand and dice the meat, or, as he suggests, you have it coarsely ground. So my butcher, I do have a regular butcher. He did this for me some weeks ago with enough fat to make a sensational chili, and he now knows how I like it ground. And you have to cook it not a lot longer, but sometimes with ground beef you can get a good chili in 45 minutes to an hour. I figure this is at least an hour and 15. And then at that point I add some beans, not that many. For 2.5 pounds of meat, I use 1 can of dark kidney beans with all the liquid inside. And it sort of softens the edge, the bean liquid, the bean cooking liquid.
It also helps make
softens the edge of the chilies.
It also makes it thicker, too.
And it makes it, mine doesn't need to be thickened, actually, but but it does, it makes it a little thicker. Now, I have a formula for my chili powder, but next time I'm doing it, I'm going to do it what just seems to be, according to this book, the original way, which is to boil the chilies and use the liquid and the pureed chilies as the liquid for the meat.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? Well, of course, you were cooking on the back of a chuck wagon. By the way, the original chilies were wild chilies in Texas. You go, I don't know my Texas very well. I only know urban places in Texas. But if you go rural Texas, apparently there are wild chilies all over the place. So that was where the original, it was a chuck wagon dish. It's not a Mexican dish at all. In fact, my Mexican housekeeper stuck her nose up in the air about it until she tasted mine. She said, "Oh, I've had other people's chili, but it doesn't taste like yours." So I'm proud of that. All right. Well, but it's Sicilian week here with all this caponata,
and it's also
and of course it's Italian Heritage Month.
And
I gotta say, I got sick of this because for 30-something years, I had to feature only Italian food for Columbus Day because all the advertisers were advertising their Italian sales and the supermarkets were featuring Italian products like that.
Well, now you can do anything.
Now they don't care about Columbus anymore, but Italians, that's something else.
Yes.
If I look at my Facebook page today, which I have not done yet, I'm sure, because I have so many Italian-American people contributing their 2 cents to everything, that I'm sure I'm going to find lots on this subject. Anyway, I hope to see some people in Sheffield on November 6th at 2 p.m., Saturday afternoon. We'll chat about me and you.
There you go.
Okay.
All right, Arthur, we'll speak to you next week. Arthur Schwartz, the Food Maven, here on Robin Hood Radio, robinhoodradio.com. You'll also find him at robinhoodradio.com. Click on Demand, and then click on Arthur Schwartz, the Food Maven, and there you have it.
Underwriting support for Arthur Schwartz, the Food Maven, John Andrews Restaurant on the Hillsdale Road in South Egremont, 413-528-3467, and on the web, jarestaurant.com. Rubiners Cheesemongers and Groceries on Main Street in Great Barrington, 413-528-0488, rubiners.com. Hillsdale Home Chef, more information, 518-325-7000, hgshomechef.com.